Good afternoon and most welcome to the Jubilee lecture. We have now reached no less than 800 lectures. The 800th. Isn't that amazing? We covered, I'd say, almost everything in the areas of philosophy of science, in science as such. We looked at physics, we have looked at chaos theory, we have looked at fractals, and further on we dwelled into philosophy. And it started with Heidegger, so that is the name H of the series. But we progressed further. We went into Sigmund Freud even, Carl Jung, and then into the legacy of Heidegger, Derrida, Merleau-Ponty, and modern days, Eugene Gendlin, and also some of his disciples, you could say, Macfarlane, for instance. And we also dwelled into the science of cognition. Shemiro was a big name there, and then we had Gibson, extraordinary insight, something that changed my view, and I hope all of your view on what is reality. And we started to have a closer look into this unspoken idea of representationalism. And I have to be honest, that was actually an idea that plagued me for decades before. And I had no idea how to sort of approach it. I could criticize it, but I had no idea what was actually wrong with it. And those are, I'd say, two very different levels. One, and that's maybe the starting level, and I'm now more or less saying exactly the same as Thomas Shimero. It always starts with the criticism. You put yourself in the opposing camp, and you create a polarity. But then you go further than the polarity, hopefully, if you can. If you acquire the practice, the knowledge, and we did that. We found what's wrong with representationalism, and we could go much further than criticism, because in a way criticism is extremely limited. Sometimes criticism doesn't evolve to anything other than a turning of the polarity. So that's a problem, criticism, but it's always the start. Then you sort of deepen the whole thing and you gain knowledge, and in the end representationalism didn't pose any problem for me to cope with. I can listen to people who sort of still are affected by the mistake somewhere, and I also understand why they do it. And I say it's not a particular point of view they're inhabiting. They need to know things I didn't know either. Because before you start looking into those things, you actually don't know what you're talking about. Criticism is partly based on not knowing. And this is also a little thing I'm going to get into in the Jubilee lecture. And I really hope it's going to be something extra special. I mentioned before I was a bit nervous here at the last leg of the 800 series. Would I be able to sort of construe something fairly interesting to be sufficient to do an 800 thing? Earlier times I didn't even care, because I know I was happy enough to have the century finished. But today I really want to have something extra. And this lies in this area of the first criticism, but more important afterwards, deepening and understanding. And this is in this area you understand that the one thing you were criticizing before and you were pointing to and said it was wrong, no longer seemed to be wrong. You see what created it. So you sort of encompass it, and that's of course what we need to do. And this is actually the optimal method in science, because criticism doesn't lead to construction of anything new. Criticism is in a way just a reversal. It's saying no to something, but you don't have anything else to do. And that's also the thing with criticism. It's not something to bring up in the book to great length, because people will then have to do with the criticism and negation of what is. They don't have any options. So they're all saying, why criticizing darkness? Is it not better to lit a candle or a light? It's absolutely true. Today's lecture goes into another area that we sort of touched and went further into, and actually led to a cooperation with our Belgian friend in Antwerp/Ghent. Jan Eiskens, who is specializing in neurology, and we learned a great deal there, and it's really never-ending well when I speak to Jan. He has always something new going on, and the depth is quite amazing. And me coming from quite another area of technology and philosophy of science, have very often a great struggle to understand. I don't have 30 years of practicing and studying neurology, medicine and biology. I can't say that. But one of the points he made the other day, it really struck me. I was gobsmacked, to say the least. And it just came at the end of a conversation. He showed me a video of a person getting treated for a trauma. And that's why I named today's lecture, Why People with Burnout Syndrome Can't Tell Fibs. And this was definitely one of those things that Jan said, I had no idea what he was pointing towards. He showed me, I think it was a soldier who had suffered trauma. And that soldier was walking on a treadmill with loads of instruments, checking his heart rate, pulse, I don't know what else, maybe some sort of electroencephalogram as well. And he was looking into a screen while walking, focusing on what was on the screen. But he was also told to focus his mind on different things. And whereas the whole thing went on, there was a distractor turning up on the screen. So the screen was showing the location for the trauma, maybe where he got shot or was some attack. And then all of a sudden is this artificial thing turning up to sort of divert or confuse his gaze. And this is constructed so as to move the person to another level. And that's sort of tricky. What is it level? Yes, it is a fact that traumatized people, people with burnout syndrome, cannot tell fibs. They cannot lie. They can do confabulation, but that's quite another thing. Confabulation is something that the person doesn't himself believe in. It's what you say when you don't have anything else to say. And we usually take that to be a lie. But it's not a lie, it's something you do when you have nothing else to say. A little bit when you catch your child in with a hand in the cake box, you ask him, what are you doing here? And he says, you, what, me? Well, he doesn't know what to say, so he says something. There's a question, and the question demands an answer. That's confabulation. No, a lie is something you can make other ones really believe, and even more importantly, something that you yourself believe. And that's the third level. And the third level is lacking in traumatized people. They have two levels. The first level being a sort of a perception of surrounding. The second is some sort of self-talk or thinking. Self-talk or thinking. The third one is lacking. What is the third one? Well, the third one is saying something that is untrue. It's a lie. And what is untrue? Well, it goes against number one here, the perception, where you are at. What on earth is this? Well, I was thinking the same thing. I don't understand anything, and I think my mouth was open. I was gasping. What on earth is this? Well, this it is how it is. It's fairly simple once you understand it. If you have a perception of the surrounding, if you have some sort of self-talk and thinking, you have an experience, a perception of reality. So far, so good. But this one is a lie. What is this one? It is the future. What? The future? How can the future be a lie? The future is always a lie because it doesn't stand in coherence to these two things. Reality is here because we perceive only this now. Everything that's not now is a lie. The body will feel it to be a lie, and the mind will also feel it to be a lie. Call this the body and this the mind. This goes against both. You construe the future. It has a feature of magic in a way. It has not anything to do with the surrounding, because in 2 hours you're going to be somewhere else. I'll be walking in 1 hour if I can stand the darkness that's around us, these final moments of moments. That flies in the eyes what surrounds me and what my body perceives. And if you think this is sort of a simplification or even untrue, this actually goes for most animals. They are only in the now. And if they do something that's not in the now, that is usually hardwired. They don't lie to themselves. If a bird takes a seed and fly away to the nest, that's hardwired. They haven't planned it in that way. So there's no need for them ever to leave reality. We, however, do it frequently. And the stuckness, let's get back here to my favorite scheme here. First, we divide something. And then we prioritize something, the one to the left today. And after that, we do a marginalization. And what is this? Well, Either we could say now or and the future, division made. But I'm going to go further. I'm going to say false and true. We make a divide of everything, and we put true to be better, because true is presence in a way. Think about it. True is what you have around you. It's also here, which is important, close to you, in the now, but also geographically close. It doesn't make much bodily or mental sense to talk about presence in Madagascar or Cape Bahur or something like that. It needs to be here, close to the subject. And this other one, the untrue, I call it the S value in Swedish or T value in English, true, and this is false, falskt. The phony thing is absent. It's not here. It's not something you can perceive. Unperceptible, impossible to perceive. And to a certain extent, it's even contrary. So you see here, falsehood and future are very similar in some ways. Could be the same thing. Falsehood is absent. Future is absent. And some of the things in future is contrary to the present state. Once I'm around walking, my pace will be different than it is now. The things I see around me will be different. And for me to construe that future bodily and mentally, we talked about that earlier, that future is something you do body-wise. You cannot think of the future because you do the future. And you need to sort of go a little forward. It's just a matter of millimeters, but you need to do that. Otherwise, you can't bodily do future. And we're all differently good at this. It's not something natural. Some people can't do it at all. There are actually people who are like animals, stuck in the now. And it's reason to say that before Barbara Tversky pointed out the caves and decontextualization, recontextualization, you understand somewhere what she was pointing at makes it obvious that people before that were stuck in a now. How could you construe a falsehood if the only thing you have is a long presencing? And they could not have past, now and then, because they were constantly in the present, so to speak. It was before the divide. And I'd say, obviously from these cave paintings, you also understand that decontextualization was impossible. It was exactly embodied in reality, reacting in a way. And of course, those people were more animalistic, now living. Here we have the same area here, criticism and deepening. We criticize this. And some of these things come from Jacques Derrida, another person who we dwelled rather deeply into. And he doesn't fit the slot of philosopher, he doesn't fit the slot of psychologist, he is all over the place. Literary criticism, he is bigger than the slots, he goes beyond them, because he actually tells the process, the movement, it happens, and how we somewhere on the way get stuck, the stuckness, because this is what the traumatic person do. He gets stuck in the happening, in what happened to him or her, because they are constantly reliving what happened to them every moment, especially nighttime. What traumatic episode cannot be eradicated. This method that Jan showed me is actually rather effective. What it does, it learns the person to construct a fib, a lie, to start thinking things that are untrue, and then starting to invest energy, force into it, and really embody it. And this is still to this day that we are obsessed by the truth. And if you don't believe me, look at the recent debate we had in Sweden, maybe abroad as well, about fake news. And this whole idea that educational system has the truth is fantastic. Although truth is never used in commercial or in industry. Never. There is not such a thing as a true car. Neither is the true cup of coffee. Such things do not exist. This is a division. If it gets stuck, it gets problematic. It gets an obsession. It's a trauma. And here we have the trauma of the Greek, because the Greeks started that. The division is quite all right. We need to do division, but we need to do two things. We need to be able to change the division, because the world is flexible. It's not only on one level, like the traumatized person thinks. Only one level for everything. When you are here, presencing this thing right now, that's the only real for Plato, Socrates, Parmenides. And that's why they have such a great problem with absence, emptiness, future. Does future exist in Zeno's paradox? No, doesn't exist any future. Everything is calculated and thought about in the now. That thing that the hare really catches the tortoise is a lie, according to Zeno. And now we know why the problem erupts, because Zeno doesn't want to have falsehood in his thinking. He wants to get rid of falsehood. He wants to reach the very essence, the truest of the truest thing. And that can only be what is present to me now, close to me as a subject, observing something and also saying things. And by this saying, we are seminating the words with meaning. And that meaning can get transported and transfer the message of truth to Kalle, to Henrik, to Jan, or who else might be in the neighborhood or by the channel. So we put in a pause here and we go into a bit of a more celebratory mood. So now in this present, in the presence of each other, we are going to celebrate a little bit here. Well deserved, I'd say. So I'm gonna end the lecture with a glass of champagne, like we did in the 700, I think. Let's see. It does not want to yield. Why is that? This is the problem with live television. I think last time we were at the grave of Bellman, weren't we? Or no, it was the great explorer. The last person knighted in Sweden, Sven Hedin.
Yes, indeed. Was it 700? Yes, Bellman.
That was 700, yes.
Yes, Bellman is Stockholm. Oj, 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 oj.
Skål! Thank you everybody who helped this becoming reality. Thank you very much, Henrik Gustafsson up in Stockholm. Thank you very much, Jan Eiskens. Special thank also to John August Appleton, Pete Green. All you have been a very important thing in this development.
Sune.
Yeah, and of course our dear friend Sune Hillmart, supporting, sponsoring the development and believing in us. And we also need to make a cheer for our deceased friend, recently passed Kjell Burman, the vicar, who's been helping to making this a reality and always being supportive. When I say cheers, and cheers to my dear colleague Kalle, who loyally always be on my side, helping with great patience with the recording. Cheers, everybody, and congrats!
Cheers. Hurra för Hans.
Hooray for everyone! Hurra! Hurra! Hurra!
Hurra.
Hurra! I fill up a little bit, and we're gonna take the last leg of the lecture. This static, steady place, which is the present, the now, is something that obsessed already the Greek. And actually, now it all makes a lot more sense. Why did the Greek have such problem with the future? Because they already made a division, and that division got solidified. And that's where the problem erupts. It's when you no longer are conscious that you have made a division. You are just acting out the prioritizing and the marginalization. And for every time you do that, you have to put a lot of energy. And traumatized people are spending loads of energy trying to keep the future away from their reality. It's incredibly energy consuming to do that. So they are constantly complaining of tiredness, just like people who are suffering from burnout syndrome. It's taking an enormous toll on our system. And there are so many reasons for this. One of the reasons is, of course, the lie is needed for our movement. Without a lie, we cannot move. We don't come into movement only from presence. And it's actually quite fair to say this problem we have with the body today is caused by this, because we are no longer accessing the third level on a general basis. We do not have this idea of the futures, and they are very much, if there is a future, it's incredibly influenced by the past, by what's already established. And that, what is already established, is a pattern of tension in the body, where you actually don't do the division that should be in the body. This is odd. By ignoring this division and forgetting about it, we don't do the divisions, the working divisions that are supposed to be done in the body. And the reason for this is, once you make a division, the things you divide into, they actually need to be whole. They can't have any differences within them, because to constitute a contradiction, the both sides need to be homogeneous. Otherwise, it won't be a contradiction. And oddly enough, this is a grand problem, because it could be that a division needs to be made somewhere. And in the division between body and mind, a division needs to be made in the body. It needs to be somewhere else. Dividing line between the tensed areas and the laxed areas are something we can't do anymore. And the reason for that, I'd say it's caused by this ignorance or the lack of a remembrance that we once put a division and sort of a handicap almost, or the possibility of changing the division is blocked out of vision. Because it's so sternly established in our body, this can only be upheld by a bodily tension. We stop our future, our action, by tensing. We hinder ourselves from going into action. So this tension wants us to stay put, to be immovable in one spot. And this is of course very, very similar to the Newtonian paradigm, where there is no future at all, because the future in Newton is just a line that you draw in the present, and you can see the whole future going from a now to the end of times, now to the Big Bang, Big Crunch. And for Newton there was no future. Everything was decided by now. And that, even when you start thinking about it, doesn't even look like time at all. It's a presence. It's a logocentric movement that Newton did, where he tried to firmly set everything once and for all in this very moment, or in that moment, 1689, for it never to be moved again. And this is just a mechanical version of the Greek ideal of a static, non-moving universe, where nothing can happen, where absence is dispelled, castigated, blocked out of vision, and where what is false is said to be not part of the world. How that could actually be true, it's very hard to see. How could falsehood not be a part of the universe? Where does it lie? From what is it constructed? Is it not made by thoughts? Is it somewhere else, in some transcendent place? Actually, they are both part of knowledge, things that we can know. They are part of this world, and so is future. Future is part of the whole. And by never being able to change this division, we get this stuckness. And this is so similar. I was thinking when I saw this chap walking the treadmill, poor old soldier who got traumatized, that he's having the whole world on his shoulder. He really looked pressed down. It was something of a burden. And this is a burden, and it takes a toll on us, because to block out the future, the fibs, the lie, the contradiction, because this is parasitic as well. I mentioned that before. If we just want to have presence and existence, we need to use what it's not to make it come into reality. It's a dependence. And dependence always means that there is a price you pay for doing these things. It's not for free. And for every time you say there is existence, there's matter, you enforce the idea of lack, something being not present, something not being nice. And of course, this goes for the schizophrenic viewpoint of today. We are all stuck in this truth hysteria. We're looking for the truth, and the more we look for it, the less we find it. Because to have truth, we need falsehood. Otherwise, we have no idea what the truth could be. So the codependency means that we go more and more into the opposite, the falsehood. And in the end, we can't even tell the things apart. That is something that presencing does to us. This idea of ever present now. And once more, I'd say this is a mechanized Platonic cave. It's just made a little bit prettier with the cog wheels and maybe some oil over there, and you add the idea of effectiveness and outcomes, television sets and everything. I think that's the general idea among people. And I think this also shows why is it that we today have so many traumatized people. Because the stuckedness is already out there in our bodies before the trauma happens. We don't have any good description of any trauma happening in a war or accident somewhere before the 16th century. It's very, very seldom. Now it's about 30% when we count the Iraq War. 30%. And that was also, relatively speaking, a rather short war. So you see here, something has changed that makes this even more possible today. Schooling system, teach the students, take away all the bad things, which is the false. Stop dreaming. Stop believing in elves, unicorns. You might as well say to a person in the 18th century, but stop believing in quantum mechanics, it's not there. And that's exactly what they said. Physics has end. Even Max Planck was advised by his own professor, don't go into physics. That subject is terminated. We have been saying, at least from the 17th century, everything is already established, nothing new can come, and we are castigating children in the school who are lying, imagining something new, more wondrous. And science, as we know, it has gone down. It's getting more and more stuck like a traumatized person in the now. And open every school book, everything comes back to classical physics. Nobody even likes anymore. I was fascinated. I read some papers, early newspaper from the 17th century. It's full of ideas and findings that we call fibs. But today we see very little of that. Because we are getting a direct reaction from our spine not to think about the future anymore. The teacher says, don't think future. There is no future. Don't imagine things. And in the 18th century, don't imagine a flying machine. Don't imagine a machine that can walk on water. Don't imagine a thing that can watch the body from inside. They said all of those things. Thousands of negative things just because they were not present. Just because they were not present. So this stuckedness is a part of our heritage. And only God knows, only God the Lord knows how many inventions, discoveries, new thinking that had been stopped because of this tendency to trying to get away with falsehood. This is trying to get away with the future. And I think we almost managed, because we have a climate catastrophe coming up. We have loads of things. It is obvious we no longer think about the future or have any hope for it, because go to the educational system. That's the worst thing you can do, think about the future. Do not ever do that. And of course, then you get a lot of burnout syndrome. They already taught to get stuck in the now and nowhere else, not to tell any lies. Because the teacher said to them, the more facts you collect, as long as they are true, the better it is. Now we know why that tendency could be very, very problematic. And now we also have a solution for the whole thing. And I think this could be quite good enough for the 800th lecture. And I say once more, cheers and thank you very much, dear friends.
Thank you. Cheers.